This is your first trip to Australia. How's it going so far?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been we've only done a couple of shows, and we're just about to do our first headline show, and it's going to be very interesting to see what it's like. You know, I mean, we it's clear from the shows we've done that there's some people know a bit of our stuff, but yeah, it'd be very cool to see what an Aqualung gig in Australia is actually like. So we'll find out soon.
What have you had time to see or do anything? Try any Vegemite? Do anything like that?
When we arrived, we got a kind of present from the promoter, which was basically sort of indigenous snacks. So we got some Vegemite. Yes, it's a big tube. I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, so I just squirted it all into my mouth.
Tell us about these shows. You're touring with Evermore. Have you been hanging out with the guys much?
So yes, we've been hanging out and talking, and they're nice fellas. They're just so young. It's preposterous. We didn't quite realise. And we went out for dinner and we were talking, and it's like, really? Oh no, I can't possibly be 16 years older than the youngest member of Evermore, which I am. It's like, what? Go to your room.
So you're touring here with your brother Ben, who also plays bass and guitar, and he also writes with you, as does your wife Kim.
That's right.
How do the dynamics work in Aqualung? Do you recommend working with family?
Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. I think it works for us. There's a sort of, the stakes are made quite high. You know, potentially I could be having the worst time of my life if it's not going well, and like there's nowhere to turn. I can't go talk to Ben about it, and I can't talk to Kim about it, and my whole life's ruined. But at the same time, I always think that perhaps the stakes should be high. You know, it can be a mistake to be too cosy and comfortable, and it means that we really care. We all really care about the stuff, and we all have pretty high standards, and we don't want anything to happen that any one of us would not be happy with. And so it takes a while for us to kind of all agree that a song is finished. But I think they're better for that kind of rigorous, slightly white knuckle kind of approach.
What's your process with writing a song?
Music is basically in me all the time. Has been from as long as I can remember. I don't know why, it just is. It's like there's a kind of 25 radio stations playing in my head. It's actually quite annoying. And they're either playing songs other people's songs that I know and love, or something I just heard on the radio, or my own song that I'm halfway through writing, or a song that I wrote when I was 8. You know, it's like all the time, and I can just sort of tune in. And one of the stations is normally like, here's some new ideas for you, Matt. You know, wherever they come from. And that just all I need is a bit of time and a bit of time to myself. And I can normally, the music will just come that sort of, it just comes along. If I have a piano particularly, and just singing, something generally kind of happens. Sometimes it's rubbish and you kind of go, okay. But more often than not, the rubbish ideas, later on, even years later, like a bit of that idea, or that idea backwards, or a tiny fragment of it becomes really important for some other song. So it seems quite efficient. Like, mostly doesn't get wasted forever.
And from all those songs, how did you narrow down your final selection for Memory Man? What sort of sound were you going for?
I had a very clear idea about the sound for this record. I did want it to be... There was always this kind of play between two elements, which is sort of, in simple terms, like horror-struck and optimistic, you know, and sort of represented sonically by synthetic and kind of organic sounds, I suppose. And the album as a whole is like a sort of cyborg, because it has this kind of sort of synthetic, robotic, electronic, slightly kind of spacey aspect, and then there's also these very kind of familiar...
The first single off the album is Pressure Suit. What's that song about? How did that come about?
Pressure Suit had started its life as like just an idea, which was, is it possible to write a kind of song that's very, could be quite immediate in a strange time signature? Because just that's one of the downsides of having also been a classically trained musician or whatever. It's like I know too much about music, and sometimes I need to try stuff out. But there's this particular kind of thing. So like most music, rock, pop music's in these fours all the time, and this song's in sixes. And to get technical for a second, often things are in sixes, but they're in groups of 2 3s, whereas this is actually in groups of 3 2s, which gives it a very different feeling. And it doesn't matter if you understand that or not, but if you listen to the song, there's something about the rhythm that keeps kind of cutting you off almost. Every bar you get sort of interrupted, and it sort of throws you onto the next beat. So that first of all, I just had the rhythm, the idea of this rhythm, and that immediately gave this sense of a journey, because it was a sort of forward momentum built into the rhythm, and then the music kind of came with this sort of circular kind of tumbling music. And yeah, and it ended up being, this was a song that took ages to finish. I mean, the music and the tune came really soon after I had the initial idea and this energy that felt like it needed to be all kind of zooming forward, sort of slightly breakneck speed. But then it was a question of how best to put that into words, this kind of thing, and it was actually perfect. It was one of the first songs that I'd sort of demoed, and it didn't have any words. And it was obviously quite a key piece of music. But we didn't end up finishing the words till quite near the end of the record, by which time it sort of, we knew what we had to say, because it had sort of become this central song, which was, whereas the whole record is kind of about this relationship between near and far, and sort of found and lost and hopeful and hopeless and all those things, real and synthetic. This song is really got all that stuff in itself in the one song, because it ended up being this story about a sort of hopeful, or sort of fingers crossed type journey home against the odds from a billion miles away, and then also the people at the other end kind of looking up and having their fingers crossed too, and no real certainty that they'd make it, but hoping nonetheless.